in that one. Sit in this one. The blue light one.
Okay. Well, thank you guys also. I want to reiterate, that's awesome that you would come out tonight and to support us. I know there was a lot of interesting stuff that came on when we went out. But I'm going to, now that you know some of what happened, I'm going to take a little different approach and kind of go day by day, sort of. Given the time, we tried to keep it an hour, but it's probably going to run a little longer. I'll try and shoot the important stuff out first, so if you guys have kids and have to leave, I totally understand that. And you can go, and yeah. So my trip started out, mine was 3 weeks because I got to go to the Galapagos Islands as well. And so that was really exciting for me. I, at first, wasn't even sure if I was going to get enough funds to be able to go on my trip at all. And then it turned out, one of the things that I got taught throughout this trip is God totally used it completely. And I got more than enough funds, and so I could go to the Galapagos Islands, which was an amazing, amazing experience. And you'll see some of the pictures up there later. So
4th of July.
So June 27th and 28th and 29th was our drama training. And I wanted to just reiterate a little bit of the stress that went on in there. I have the little schedule here, and you probably can't see, but it's like 6 o'clock is dinner in your room, 6:20 leader meeting, 7 to 8:30 flagnum, 8:30 to 9 team time, 9 to 10:30 drama casting, lights out to be announced. And that was because life was so crazy, you may not get to go to bed, ever. 6:45, wake up, breakfast. And we had it in shifts because there was so many of us. And then 8:15 to 8:45 was team devotions, 9 to 12 p.m. was drama training. Oh my goodness, way to get sick of it. So that was one of the first hurdles I got to overcome. In the drama, let's see, there's a toy maker who is like the representation of God. And there's the toy maker's son, which is the representation of Jesus. And then there's all these different toys. There's a nurse, a Spanish dancer, photographer, soldier, all these crazy toys. And they are people like us. And one of the toys, the Spanish dancer, is Mary, and so she's the mother of Jesus, obviously. And then one of the baseball players, I think it was Judas, and so they played a part that way. And then there's a prince and a princess who were like Adam and Eve, and the evil magician, woot, and that was Satan, obviously. Then there were like the evil cats, which you might see their like colorful costumes. And there were Roman soldiers, so they had like the whole crucifying part, which is pretty intense. Then there were the mimes, and they were God's creation. And not only were they like the tree, like the tree of life or whatever, that had the fruit for Adam and Eve, but they were also, they showed emotion. So they had anger, they had despair, hate, fear, lust, you know, all those sort of things. And they created a barrier between the God and the Jesus figure and us when we were doing our play. So that was interesting. So the Spanish dancer character obviously is a dancer. And for those of you who don't know, I do a ton of ballet, and it's kind of my life. And so I was kind of hoping not to get cast as the Spanish dancer, because I went into it and I'm like, okay, God, whatever you want, I'm going to try out for everything, and what you give me, I'll take, and that's what I'm going to be. But they're like, okay, now let's try out for the Spanish dancer. And I look at my friend and I'm like, I suppose I have to go up there. And so I tried out, and there were like very few Spanish dancer characters that tried out. And so you can kind of tell when they know things, like they ask you to do like all these different emotions and stuff, and then for specific characters they call you out. And so I was really nervous that I was going to get the Spanish dancer character. So then they called the cast, and it turned out that I did get the Spanish dancer character. And I was like, okay, God, I said I'd be anything you want me to be. I meant anything you wanted me except for the Spanish dancer. And so, well, it was pretty, but I felt like I did that my whole life, and I kind of wanted a different part. And I knew I could probably do it okay, but I was just like, yeah, no. But I got it, so I accepted it, and it ended up being an amazing part. I was so glad I had it. It was like you got to choreograph your own part, which was cool, and you could do all this stuff, and it was really fun. It was perfect. So that was kind of like a God moment there, because, I mean, I got to, like, see the baby Jesus, and, I mean, obviously it was a doll, but it was so cool to be like, wow, this is baby Jesus right here, and wow, just putting myself in that place was really super cool. So we had a ton of drama training, as you can see. And we flew in, and most of our group was on the poor, pathetic early flight, but there were a couple of us who weren't. So when the flight failed for the later people, there were a couple people who didn't come in our drama, and one of those people was the China doll, and she was one of the toys as well, and so that was kind of hard because we had to replace her, but we were able to do that with one of the leaders in training, the Lits, and so that was helpful, and we put her in, and it was the first day, and it ended up working out pretty good, and so we went to a park. It was the second largest park in Quito, and because of the high elevation, the first 2 days, someone on our team passed out, and so it was great. He's just standing there, he's like telling the leaders, you know, I really don't feel good, I think I should probably go to the bus, and all of a sudden, he's on the ground, and we're like, oh wow, okay, guess we should maybe pick him up a little. So, but it ended up that, you know, we were able to, you know, we always had 2 bottles of water that was required, and so, the park was really cool on the first day, and then the second day would have been July 2nd, and so we went to a church in the southern part of Quito, because apparently our translators explained. They're like, there's 4 parts to Quito. There's a northern, southern, eastern, and western. Go figure. So, did you know they have awanas in other countries? I thought that was pretty cool. They have awanas, and so all the little kids, for those of you who don't know what that is, that's like a group where kids meet and you learn about God and memorize scriptures. It's sort of like Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts for the Christian way. Like you learn scriptures and stuff like that. And so one of the great things was we're driving along in our bus, and our translator's like, you know, this part of town is really scary. There's lots of guns here, and what do you call it, bad, when something bad, gangs, yeah. And then we're like, you know, it's taken us a long time. I think we're lost. And then the translators are like, yeah, we're lost. So we kind of got lost, but it was okay because we ended up getting there eventually. So we got there and we did our skit, and it was really cool because then we were able to go, we did it once with the kids, and then we ate lunch, and then the kids came in and they sang, and we had a different translator that day. They had to swap out, and so he led worship, and it was so cool because here you're holding these like little kids. I think there was like a 7-year-old who came up to me and she's like, and wanted held, and I'm like, ugh! By the end, I'm like, you know, you're a little too heavy. My arm's like dying, but that's okay. It was so cool. And so these little kids, I mean, they're sitting there and they're singing in Spanish and we're singing in English, and they're looking at you like, huh? And you're thinking, wow. And you're singing, but you're doing the same thing. You're praising the same God in 2 totally different languages. And we have, most of us, have no clue what Spanish we're saying, or we don't really get Spanish. And most of them have no idea how to say hello in English. And so here we are, but we can still accomplish the same purpose. And that was really cool, because to me, one of the language barriers was one of the biggest differences. I mean, after the flight from Miami, it was sort of like, hola, and I'm like, huh? I think I left into a different world. But, I mean, it was really cool. So, that was really one of the fun days. And then the next day was Sunday. And so Sundays we did something a little different. We had E-I-E-I-O-K sessions. Everything I ever intended on knowing. And so they were sort of like our church service. Like, we had a church service, and then there were like 10 of them that you could pick from, and they were all amazing. My whole team was like, wow, I don't know which ones to choose from. And so you would go, and you could go to 2 of these sessions. And I think it was actually before that, but one of the people who led the sessions, he was like talking, and I think he was the one who led the Sunday service, Jed Johnson. He was awesome. And so he came up with this idea, and I thought, why is it we incorporate this out on the ministry field, and yet we don't do this in our daily life? And his idea was, it's called the treasure chest. And so you pick, there's 4 categories. There's appearance, problems, location, and other. And when you're praying or when you're worshiping or whatever, if you feel led to do this, you just pray and ask God to show you, something. And so, like for appearance, it could be yellow shirt, it could be blonde hair, it could be, any of these things, anything appearance. And then you go through and you find something like that. And you write it down so that it's not just something you came up in your mind, it's something that you actually had there. And then when you're out on the ministry field, the next day you look for this person, and it's so crazy. Like, you can pick out this person, and I mean, God just brings them into your life. And so then you go up to this person, and sometimes it won't always work out. One of the girls on my team, she's like, that's my person right there. And she went into a store, and she's like, oh, can we follow her? And we're all like, yeah, come on, let's go follow her. And we go up, and we're like, have you ever heard about Jesus? And she's like, no. And we're like, well, would you like to? And she's like, not really. And we're like, okay. And so, it's not going to always work out, but it's so cool. Some of these stories, I mean, there were loads of stories that I could just tell that were like, tons of times, God brought this person, and they were like, yeah, that, I think one of them had a dream about something like that. Anyway, it was super cool. So treasure hunts were really awesome. So then there was the 4th of July, and that was a really fun time. That day we went to the plaza. And the plaza was really an interesting experience. So we had to get our permit to, because it's a public place, and then there's like the policeman, and they're like watching you. And you're like, hello, it's okay. And so we're at the plaza, and so my friend Allison and me and one of the translators, Eric, and one other boy was with us, and we were all going out, and we'd just been praying with this one person. And so we finished praying with him, and our translator is kind of like, okay, girls, stick with me. Okay, come with me, girls, let's go. Okay, ready, girls? Okay, girls, we're just heading back to the group. Okay, don't look around, just stay with me, stay really close. Okay, girls, run. We're like, it was so scary. And so we go running back across the plaza to this other group. And come to find out, there was this man who had been drinking, and he'd been drinking throughout our whole drama, and so our translator knew some of the people around there, and so he comes up to him and he's like, so, are there any questions you have? And he's like, no. And the dude's like, okay, well, I think then if you don't have any questions, you probably should keep your distance, because we have lots of kids here. And he's like, okay. And he continued to follow this translator around. So the translator finishes praying, and he sees this dude coming towards him, and he's like, oh man. So he gets us back to the group, and we're safe. And so the boys, there were a couple of boys who saw it and like closed in, and so my friend totally like ran away and like was having a panic attack. And so I was like, I turned my back, I was freaking out, but I was like, okay, what if he really has something, like we can, Jesus went to the lepers, so maybe we go to the drunk people, okay? And so then he's standing there, and he's like, I don't know, and the translator translates, and he's like, so this man wants you to pray for his drug addiction. And I'm like, okay. So we hold hands, and I'm shaking, and I pray for his drug addiction, and that he would be able to overcome it, and that everything. I was like, oh, wow, I think this is the first time, but I thought that was really cool that, he tried. So then we finished the prayer, and obviously he was a little interesting. So we finished the prayer, and instead of like amen or nodding his head, he goes like this. And I'm like, okay. So it was really interesting because we got to experience some of the actual Ecuador life. We weren't always maybe in the safest situations per se, but it was really, it was cool to get to still not have that fear hanging over you and to still get to go out there. Then the next day, this was cool. We went to a really, 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 really poor place. And we had a really fun bus ride. The horns are a second language. You can reach out and touch the car next to you in the other lane. And on this particular day, we went up a really fun road. And at one point, they're like, okay, everyone lean to the left, because our bus was about to flip over to the right. So, don't take the kids off the bus because, no, just lean to the left. So we all leaned to the left and got on the left side of the bus, and we ended up living through that one. And so we get up there, and I don't know if all of you know about Compassion International, but there was a kid who had a Compassion International shirt on, and he was super, they're super poor, they don't have enough food, they don't have, enough money to provide for their families or anything, and this was obviously one of the places that had been sponsored there. And so we go to this church, and we're up there, and this is where I got to do my testimony, and it was really crazy because the stage, once again, was really small, and we're tripping over ourselves, and then the microphone didn't work, and between the bus ride and that, the mic didn't work, and so I'm screaming out my heart. I'm like, well, at least it's my testimony, not the other girl who can't hardly speak up. And I gave my testimony about being tall and hating that and how God has overcome that, and it's not always what you want, but God has a plan for it anyway. And so these kids, we brought most of our toys that day, and it was just really super cool to be up there and to see these kids so desperate and yet so happy. And so then the next day was July 6th, and this was probably one of my absolute favorite days. Certainly one I will never, ever, ever forget. We got to go to see our Compassion children, and I have a Compassion child in Ecuador. I had had her for several years, and so that was one of the toppings for this trip. I was like, wow, I get to go to Ecuador, I get to go to the Galapagos, and I get to see my Compassion child. Seriously, that's unbelievable. So I had been writing her letters. We wrote back and forth. Mom and I both sponsor her, so we wrote back and forth, and I'd seen a couple pictures of her. and I got to spend one of the best days of my life with her. It was so great. We played soccer and tag, and I gave her tons of presents, and we got to eat a meal together, because one of the things they don't get is like a good meal, and so we got to do that together. And who knows, I love Ecuador. They serve popcorn as like an entree. It's so cool. Like, just have a little thing of popcorn on the side of your plate and you just eat away. I'm like, oh, cool. And she gave me some earrings. I commented on how beautiful they are, and she's like, here you go. And it was so sweet. So one of the few journal entries I do want to read was from my compassion child, and just to say how awesome that was. So I got her to write in my journal, and she says, with all my love for you, Laura, thanks for all the gifts that you had given me. Thanks for being so cute to me. I love you too much, and your family as well. I hope that someday you will be back to go to Michela, which is her hometown, to go to Michela, and we can discover my hometown. I love you. Thanks for this amazing day that we had spent it together. I will never forget this day. You will be always in my heart. I will pray for your family a lot. And it just really, she was such a sweet girl. And now when I write letters, it's not, I hope to meet you someday, but it's, I've met you, and I loved the day that we did have together, and it was incredible. And to finish off that day, we had crazy hair day. That was pretty fun too. You may see some interesting pictures up there from that. It was sort of like, well, it was just a pigtail, but they stuffed water bottles, one on each side of my head, so it stuck straight out, and my hair is longer there. It was pretty good. So I think I even had to go through doors sideways. I was like, do.
No, and if you guys can imagine, we got in elevators, and there are already like 20 people in the elevator. So Laura's like,
yes.
my hair.
It was quite good.
It was so funny.
I just want to top one more thing off on that. For Compassion Day there, my friend, she had a compassion child, and it was her compassion child's birthday. And so she got to see him on his birthday. And not only that, but he had been praying that his mom would come to know Jesus that day. And she had a chance to say to him, she's like, so did you understand the gospel? And she just like give him the cold shoulder and stuff, and like go sit in the corner and whatever. And this girl would continue to play with the son, and finally she said, you know, do you understand Jesus and what he's done for you? And the mom was like, no. And so they got to share, and she accepted Christ that day, and it was the kid's birthday, and I can only imagine how amazing that must be. So that was really cool too. So the next day was, the next day we went to a park. And that was the day we got groceries, our team did, and we pooled, and we'd get a lot of groceries. We got like several stuff other than beans and rice, but like keepable stuff, unperishables, I guess it is. But and we'd have it in a grocery bag, and then we'd pass out the grocery bag, and it was crazy sometimes because you just run off the bus and be like, I hope it doesn't leave me. But that was pretty cool. The next day would have been the 8th, July 8th. We went to the daycare, and that was our last ministry day in Ecuador. And that was really cool because we weren't sure if it was an orphanage or a daycare on the day that we went there. And there were these two little girls, and they were adorable. They were sisters, and we couldn't talk to each other. We had no idea what we were saying. And we were on the swings, and I'd tip back and go, whee! And they would be like, ah! And then they'd be like, whee! And then one boy stole one of the girls' chairs, and she's all sad and like going to go off. And I'm like, you want to come on my lap? And she's like, huh? And the teacher sees, and she's like, and she comes and she sits on my lap, and we swing, and then I tip back, and she's like, wah! It was pretty good. She loved it. And so that was really, really fun. We got to do a work project there, which we hadn't done many there. And so we painted the back place for them, and we cleaned the whole kitchen area. The kids in there were some kids eating lunch, and it was crazy because they just put the kids in high chairs and they were lined up against this wall, and there were like so many kids. I think the youngest was like 2 months, 3 months, something like that, and it was ridiculous. I mean, he couldn't hold his head up. It was sad. But it was so cute and fun to go there. And we just played with them. We put them down. We put them down to sleep. Gave them lunch, painted. It was really great. Okay, so then we had our last day in Ecuador, it was our free day, so we got to have a little fun. So we went to the equator. You may have seen the pictures. I've been to point 000 and stood on both the northern and the southern hemisphere at the same time. And I got to try guinea pig, which was quite amazing. It really does taste like chicken, except it's greasy. And we named him Louis, and we stuck his head in a cup, except the head was forgotten in the fridge. Poor maid. So then we're leaving, and we look out over the hill, and we see these wild llamas, and they're sitting over the hill. They're semi-wild. I think they were like pets, but it was still pretty cool. You go to Ecuador and see a wild llama. So in all, I think it was totaled, obviously there were some people who said they were saved who weren't really, and there were probably some who went home and thought about the drama and ended up getting saved after they thought about it some more. But it was thought that 1,024 people accepted Christ through our whole trip. So that was really incredible to see that we could make a difference.
Tell them how they announced it.
So you would take a little towel, and so if someone accepted Jesus, then you would go and tell your leader, and your leader would mark down a person, and then the leaders would all report back to Susie, who is the head lady, and then every night they would announce, and so you could see how many people had accepted Jesus. And so, I mean, obviously it's not just about the acceptance, it's also about the walk. But it was really cool to see that first step.
They connected them to a church.
Yeah, and they connected them to a church, so that was cool. And they tried to get them a Bible, usually, depending if, usually they had one, but. Before I move on, there's one story that I thought was pretty cool that I wanted to share. There was one of the teams, not my team, but one of them in Ecuador had the chance to go to a plaza, and there was a policeman standing there, and he was watching, and he was like they thought, okay, he's mad at us because we don't have a permit or something. They'd had permit issues all day, but they finally got it, but they thought maybe he still hadn't, seen that they had it or something. So there was this girl, and she's like, I really felt led to go and talk to the policeman. And so finally they go over to the policeman, and they're like, so did you see the drama? And he's like, yeah, actually I saw it 8 years ago. And you had an altar call then, but I was too scared to come up and accept Christ. Well, this same group, Susie's mission trip, had been in Ecuador 8 years ago. And so some of those same people who had been there, even though it had been 8 years, they still got to see that this policeman had been able to see it again. And it was cool to see the second chance he had, and he accepted Christ that day. So that was really cool, because then he wasn't too shy to go over, and he got to see that again. So on day 13, which I don't know what that day was, we took off from Ecuador. That's when everyone else left. The 10th. And we took off from Ecuador, and we landed in the Galapagos, which was a 2-hour plane ride, but they're 1 hour behind, so it was only 1 hour technically. And we were part of the first 2 teams, and so we got to go over to North Seymour, which is where you see most of the animal pictures. So we saw it was cool because we flew in and there was an iguana on the end of the runway. And we're like, yep, we're in Ecuador, or at the Galapagos. And so most of the blue-footed booby birds and the red frigate birds with the red poofy things, and the iguanas and all those, the crabs and the sea lions, lots of them are all on North Seymour. So that was really cool. And then Ecuador was stricter. Like, you had to have 2 people to go out, obviously for safety reasons and stuff. But because the Galapagos was so touristy, you could go and there was a street that had tons of food, and so you could go up to that street and you could eat anything on that street, even though it was local, and not have to worry about it. And that was dinner. Like, you didn't eat dinner at the hotel. You ate dinner up there. It was cool. Although our hotel was a little sketchy, some of the boys' shower had open electrical circuits. And one time I think they said they heard like, ah! And they're like, Turner, are you okay? He was fine. But it was kind of interesting. There was no elevator there, and so we carried our bag, and I was on the almost top floor. It was 56 stairs up there and 56 back down. So that was really fun because you always made sure you had what you needed the first time, or learned the lesson the hard way. Or you could drop spit over the side of the thing. But we never did that. We were good children. So the second day, then we went and we had some work projects, and we had some touristy days as well. So we got to see the islands there. But our next day was a work project. And so we're like, so what are we going to be doing? And they're like, you're planting seeds. And we're like, yeah, that's what we've been doing this whole trip. And they're like, no, you are literally planting seeds. So we got to go and work for the Galapagosian government, which is really cool. And we planted seeds. There was like little bags, and you filled the cup full of dirt, and you stuffed it down in. It was for reforestation and stuff like that, so that it could grow plants that would like bring in the insects that would help and deter other insects and stuff like that. So that was a long day. But we got back, and everyone was headed off to Tortuga Bay, which means turtle, I believe, in Spanish. So we went to Tortuga Bay, and it was really fun. It was a huge walk, and like wearing flip-flops in our swimsuits. So we head out there, and we go, and we get there, and we're like playing in the waves, and they're like, okay, that's too far to be going out. And so then they disappear over the tops of the waves, and we're like, uh-oh. And apparently this wasn't the place we were supposed to be swimming because there was way too many waves. And it kind of was a little tad dangerous, but it was way more fun because you could play in it. And it was cool because I haven't been to the ocean that much, and so apparently it really is salty, and I got several mouthfuls of it. But, so a good learning experience. You gotta get school in there always somewhere, right? So anyway, then we went to a safer place, but the whole beach there was filled with iguanas. There were like, I think we counted 20 all plopped in this one area, and they were just like laying on each other and stuff like that. Yes, a plop of iguanas, it's true. So then the next day, we painted a high school bathroom, which was interesting. I never believed my brother that the boys' bathroom was so bad until I actually had a chance to go in it. And I'm like, you know, okay, I'll give you that. But it was interesting. There were the high schoolers, and so we got to, after we painted the bathroom, and there was this great hole up top that no one could reach, and they're like, oh, let's see who's tall. Oh, Laura! And so I got to paint this hole up like 12 feet, and there was a ladder that had probably 2 nails in it and some driftwood. And I don't like heights, and so I'm like hanging on there like, if you fall, I'll catch you. And I'm like, if I fall, I'll crush you. But we got it painted, and then we got to go over to the local soccer field. And we played soccer, North America versus South America, which was hard because we didn't have our translators with us. And so, but we played and we beat South America. Woo! I was so happy. We had some pretty good boys on our team who loved soccer, and so they were helpful. But then the ball went flat, as you may have seen in the pictures, so we couldn't really play anymore. The next day was a free day, and so we were able to go and we rented bicycles, and we went up. It was like this highway. It probably wasn't safe, but it was fun. And there is like this little cave, and you could go in there, and apparently there was a volcano that spewed, and when it spewed, there was like lava. It was one of the like lava chambers, but then water came rushing through it, and so it cooled. So it wasn't that deep, but we could go in it, and it was really cool. But then we're like, I hear a rumble. Oh, it sounds rumbly. Huh. Oh, we're under a road. And then, actually the highway to be specific, and then this dude's like, well, last time I was under the road, I was under a bridge, and 2 hours later it collapsed. And we're like, oh, thanks. So we promptly got out of there, and we rode our bikes down, which was really fun. It took us like not even half as long to get down. It was really cool. And then we got a whole bunch of touristy stuff, some of which you may see over on the table. And so then the next day was Floriana, and that was July 14th. So Floriana was interesting. We're like, okay, we've done some work projects, and now we're gonna have our little free day moments. We also, that free day, we got to go to Darwin's little place, and we got to see the turtles and all the stuff like that. So that was cool. And sorry, my notes around. So then we went to Floriana, and so we're like, okay, here we go. And this little teeny boat pulls up. Well, actually it didn't pull up because he couldn't get that close, but we go out to this little teeny boat, and we're like, okay, we can make this work. How long is it? Oh, it's 2 hours out each way. Okay. I think like 5 of us got seasick. I was not one of them, but there were quite a bit of hurling people on both of our boats. It was interesting. We got the little boat that day, which apparently you want the big boat for Floriana because it's one of the longer ones. So we went out there and we went snorkeling, and there was sea lions we got to snorkel with, and then we came back and we had lunch, which was almost always fish on the boats. It was really pretty good, except a couple times, but it was pretty good. I'm just a picky eater. So we went and we snorkeled and we went and ate, and then he's like, well, so we had a hike planned, but some of our people were like, I don't want to hike, and so we're like, okay. So we went up this hike if you wanted to go, and it was pirate caves, and they were like up there, and you can see this whole like little face. And our dude was kind of weird. He was kind of out there, but he was like, Michael Jackson came here twice, and we're like, oh yeah? And he's like, once when he was black and once when he was white. And we're like, oh. I never knew quite to believe him or not, but we got a taste of Ecuador. He was singing his Spanish songs, and we were walking through Turtle Land. It was interesting. And then the next day was Bartoloma. It was our last day in the Galapagos. And so we went out on Bartoloma, and we got a bigger boat this time, which everyone was very thankful for. And there were 370 stairs on this island, and you can go all the way up to the top. and no, you can only go to the bottom. And so you go up top, and it's cool because you can see, apparently there's like 2 seas that divide, and you can see them mixing, and it's really blue. And they're like, that's where you're gonna snorkel, and it's really windy. So I have some really cool pictures from that, except that the wind's blowing super hard, and I look like I'm at the top of Mount Everest. So then we came back down, and on the stairs they had it marked, so you'd be like, yeah, on January 1st, January 2nd, January 3rd, you're at July 8th now. So you're like, okay, and you could, measure with the year, which was cool. And then we snorkeled, and this was probably our best day of snorkeling probably because we had to pay for it, but we got good snorkel flippers. And before we didn't have flippers, and then the tube and the mask. And you could go around, there were sharks, and that was really, really cool. But he assured us, don't worry, they only like really white meat. And then he's like you, Charity, and she's from Alaska. And Charity is like, yeah, thank you. But they were white-tipped sharks, so apparently in Galapagos sharks, which apparently they're really docile. I don't know. They didn't eat me. And they have wild Galapagos penguins, so that was amazing. We're like, well, look at that. And yeah, apparently I'm really gullible, because they're like, see that penguin statue? It's a lot like that. And I'm like, oh, okay. They're like, no, that's a real penguin. I'm like, no. And there were starfish and lots of fish, and it was really pretty to snorkel there. So then the next day, I flew from the Galapagos to Quito, Ecuador, and we spent that night in Ecuador. When we got in, it was raining like none other. It was pouring. Even the translators are like, it doesn't normally rain this much. It was like flowing up from the gutters. So like the gutters were like fountains, and like, yeah, this poor man who was like walking all careful not to get wet. And then the car came by and splashed him. Anyway, I'll hurry up because I know it's 8:30 and you don't need to hear every detail. But, so then also, we got to eat at this steakhouse. The person's like, okay, I appreciate what you've done, and my treat, I'm paying for you to eat at this steakhouse. And we're like, wow. But that was really cool because he paid out of pocket for that. And then we flew from Ecuador to Bogota, Colombia, which Mom was so thrilled about. She's like, oh great, the drug capital of the world. And I'm like, yeah. So we flew from Ecuador to Bogota, Colombia, and then to Miami, and they called my parents, and it was amazing to hear their voice. I was so happy to be, I loved it, but I was so ready to be back. I got sunburned really badly in the Galapagos, which didn't help very much. But, and then from Miami, I flew to Charlotte, North Carolina, and then from Charlotte to Denver, and Denver back to Idaho Falls. So I'm almost done, but I just want to reiterate, there are a couple points in the Galapagos. It was so cool because it was a lot less official, but we still wanted to, reach out and always have a way of ministering, even if we just went on like a tour or whatever. So there was like this skate park that we went to, and they played volleyball, and it was, the boat docks were right down there, and so there was a stage, so we would do our drama on this stage, or I don't know if you've seen the Lifehouse skit, it's Everything by Lifehouse. We did that, and that was really cool too. So we do that, and we'd have worship out there, which was so phenomenal, because I've never been like under the stars, by the water, out in this, and just like praising God. It was so cool. So that was really fun. And then on the way to Ecuador, one of my great surprises was I flew 2 different airlines, so I had to get my boarding pass once I was in Denver. And so that scared me just a lot, because I was like, I've flown by myself before, but I'm like, yikes, what if I can't get it and I'm stuck in Denver and we don't know anyone that lives in Denver? So I'm kind of freaking out, and like, I'm looking for my gate all over, and I can't find it. It ended up being at the end of the airport, like the very, 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 very
I know what
last
you're
one.
talking about. I asked them somebody and they're like,
it was
people
terrifying.
can't wait longer than you think you're supposed to.
Yeah, it scared me really bad. So I'm like, okay, I can do this. We're good, God. We're going to go, and I'm going to serve you because this is your plan, and if it's not, you have a different one. And so I'm going along, and I look up, and I'm like, wow, there sure are a lot of police officers up there. Wait a minute, I think we're in the airport, and there probably shouldn't be police officers up there. So then they're like, yes, we're bringing him up to Terminal A. Terminal A. And I look up, and there's this dude in, like, handcuffs, and he's got a turban on his head. And I'm like, man, I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die. So, that was just getting there, and I'm like, wow, okay. But I found my terminal, and I flew on the flight, and no one blew up the plane. So that was very good. But anyway, it was really cool because no matter what, I was just able to see God working. I saw him working when I thought I couldn't go, and I'm like I told him from the beginning, I'm like, okay, God, I will go. I'll give you the time and myself. You just provide the money. If you get me the money, I'll go. But there's no way I can do it if I don't have the money. And he provided the money like that. It was not even a problem for him. And so he gave me the money, and then on the trip, I really saw just God working. Nothing stopped him, I guess, is probably the biggest lesson I learned. He didn't stop him that I didn't have enough money. It didn't stop him that there was a language barrier. It didn't stop him that I'm only one little girl from Idaho Falls. It didn't stop him that anything. I mean, I could just, yeah, I could go, and it was really incredible. It didn't stop him that I didn't want to be a Spanish dancer. I still got the part, and it still worked out. It didn't stop him that coming home was almost as hectic as getting there. He just got me there and got me through it, and it was incredible. So thank you guys for coming and listening and for paying attention and staying out so late. So.
Our 25 minutes didn't really work out.
I know.
But that's okay.
So eat some donuts.